to say something I'm not supposed to say.
That's okay. That's the whole point. Welcome to Unfiltered.
Thank you.
With the most unfiltered people in the world, I'm Adam Scott Bellos. This is our first episode of Unfiltered with Adam. I have a very special guest all the way from Los Angeles, Matthew Nouriel, also known as the Empress Mizrahi. Thank you. I am not worthy.
Oh, you are so worthy, and thank you so much for having me.
Tell me about yourself just quickly. What do you do?
Community engagement director for an organization called JIMENA. That's an acronym, Jews Indigenous to the Middle East and North Africa. And we work to achieve recognition of the history and heritage of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. I also work in this digital advocacy, running my Instagram page, which is just at Matthew Nouriel. And that's mostly focused around my intersecting identity of Jewish, Iranian, and queer. Right now, the focus is heavily on Israel because of everything that's going on. Last year, I was focused very much on the women life freedom movement of Iran.
Tell me a little bit about the women life freedom movement and why it's important to you. And maybe a little bit about how it connects to everything that's going on in Israel right now.
So the Women Life Freedom Movement came about in September of 2022 when the, quote, morality police of the Islamic Republic regime arrested a 22-year-old Kurdish woman by the name of Jina Mahsa Amini. While she was apprehended, she was essentially beaten to the point that she fell into a coma, and then she tragically died. And this sparked a massive outcry from the people of Iran. And through that, a global movement called Women Life Freedom was born. It's essentially a continuation of the struggle of the Iranian people that has been going on since the inception of the Islamic Republic regime, which began in 1979. But now there was a lot of differences, namely that we have social media where everybody has cameras on their phones, and we got to see in real time everything that was happening. And this movement is continuing in Iran to this very day. How it ties in with Israel is that the Islamic Republic regime, which is the regime that the people of Iran are fighting against, is essentially the head of the snake, if you will, or the head of the octopus, as Reza Pahlavi likes to say. The Houthis are an arm of the Islamic Republic regime. Hezbollah, which is right up here, the north of us in Lebanon, is also an arm, and so is Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, essentially being funded all by the same government. The Islamic Republic regime gets to wage a war without necessarily getting its hands dirty.
Do you think most people understand the octopus or the head of the snake idea?
I think anyone with half a brain understands it because it's the truth. It is what it is. I think that's mean. I shouldn't say that. But anybody who's aware of what's going on would understand it. I think there's a handful of people, particularly in the US and in the West, that sort of conveniently ignore it because, for example, Israel's fight against Hamas is essentially the same fight that the Iranian people are fighting against the Islamic Republic regime, in that it's a fight against Islamist extremism and imperialism. That's not convenient for a lot of people on the left who want to fight for these social justice causes. So some of them might have been fighting for the Women Life Freedom Movement, and now they're fighting against Israel, and it's like, well, that doesn't really gel.
You're a voice in the queer community, the queer Jewish space, which is not a gigantic space. What's the hardest thing about being in that space right now?
In the queer Jewish space or in the queer space?
I mean, the queer space in general, because you have like the movements of, Queers for Palestine and these antithetical, I guess you could say, marriage of ideology that doesn't really make sense. And it seems to me that many people like yourself who are more progressive and are in the progressive space have kind of been outcasted from their community, so to speak, because they identify with Israel. And I mean, just like you were saying, the fight against Iran or the Islamic Republic of Iran is very similar to the fight that Israel is in right now.
Yeah, and in fact, I mean, I think that's why you'll see so many young people in Iran itself like refusing to step on the Israeli flag, or because I think a lot of them view Israel as a nation that has succeeded in the fight to keep that Islamist imperialism at bay, and that's what they want.
Do you think most people in the queer and progressive space understand what Islamic imperialism is?
Certainly not on the left. I mean, I don't like to generalize. I think that the whole Queers for Palestine movement, while it's gained a lot of traction, I don't think they're the majority of LGBTQ plus people. I think most people just aren't really thinking about it. I think that they're a loud minority. Regardless, they're there and they're making a lot of noise. And yes, I've certainly been excluded and unfollowed by many other queer voices and by a handful of organizations because the pro-Hamas movement, and I'm intentional in not calling it pro-Palestine because what Hamas is doing does not help Palestinian people, it hinders them. What they've been very successful in is attaching themselves to every social justice movement that there is in the US.
Why do you think that is?
Because in terms of queer people, I feel like queer people tend to be more empathetic because we've been through our struggle with our identities and with our sexual orientation or gender identity, what have you. So we're empathetic to people that are going through a struggle. And without a doubt, the Palestinian people are going through a struggle. They don't have the upper hand in the situation. Israel has the upper hand in the situation. Israel has more power, thankfully. So I think that it's kind of a downside of the social justice movement and this requirement for people to remain oppressed so that they can be on their side. I mean, it comes down to Marxism, basically, right? So we have the oppressed versus the oppressor. And it's really easy to look at the Palestinians and go, oh my God, they're in a dire situation. They're being oppressed by the Israelis or they're being oppressed by the Jews. Unfortunately, if that's where you stop the train of thought, that's just where you're going to stay. You're going to stay at free Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine.
Why do you think people are staying there? It's not as if the Palestinian Authority or Hamas or the Islamic Republic of Iran are known for their wonderful treatment of the queer community.
I prefer to frame it as people on the extreme left than just queer people, because it is people on the extreme left, right?
You don't think they really have any connection to your community?
The extreme left has within it queer people, brown people, anybody, a lot of white people. A lot of cishet white people are
a lot of white people.
In America, dare I say racist white people.
The show is called Unfiltered. Say whatever the you want to say.
I'll try to be unfiltered. I'm so used to trying to restrict myself. I say what's on my mind at the end of the day.
It's just kind of depressing that you see the use of Marxism in such a simple way succeeding so greatly, especially amongst young people. And there isn't this safe space for progressive Zionists or queer Zionists or, pretty much anybody that identified with any piece of that community until recently. That's got to be an extremely difficult thing to be fighting against.
It is an extremely difficult thing to be fighting against.
Because like you said, it's kind of stupid.
It is stupid because intellectually stifled. I don't know what you would call it. Like to just stop at brown people oppressed and then, first of all, labeling Israel as a white supremacist nation, that's the oppressor. There's just even in that frame, there's so many discrepancies because it's just not true. Well, first of all, I'm here right now. I'm in Israel. Anybody who's been here who is speaking honestly will be able to tell you that it is not a white supremacist state, and it certainly isn't an apartheid. There are Muslim Arab people all over the place within this country, within even just the airport. I was just in South Tel Aviv. There was not a white person in sight.
Why do you think it's such a huge misconception? And why do you think
it's intentional?
Why do you think it succeeds, even if it's intentional?
I think that at the root of it is anti-Semitism. I don't think that everybody who holds that belief is necessarily anti-Semitic. I think there's a lot of people who think that they're holding that belief because it's the right thing to do, because they're only scratching at the surface. But I think at the root of it is anti-Semitism. And this is all rooted in Marxism, which began in like the 50s and 60s and then really exploded in the 60s with Arafat and the PLO and the Soviet Union's help with that propaganda machine. But it was all designed to it creates this pseudo-intellectualism, right? A lot of big words, a lot of explanation, a lot of intellectualization of something that's actually very, very simple. But you have to get through so much of that people are like, I think that they're enamored by all of this intellectualization, and what they're not realizing is that it's actually just a bunch of bullshit, and behind all of it is anti-Semitism.
So do you think that it's not actually Marxism that's at play, it's actually anti-Semitism more than anything else?
Yes.
The progressive movement and the queer movement were all about free love. And not necessarily free love, but equality of love. Would you agree?
It's about equality of peoplehood.
Of peoplehood, right? So how all of a sudden has something that was really based on equality been hijacked the way that it has? Because if you look at it, there are gay Zionists who are being uninvited to national events and I can't remember. Yuval David was telling me about some big conference that
the LGBT task force.
Exactly, and he was kicked off of it or something because he's an Israeli, not even because he's a Zionist. purely because
Yeah,
he's Israeli.
and they came out with a statement. This is the same organization that back in 2016, when A Wider Bridge, which is a Jewish LGBTQ plus organization, was speaking along with another Jewish queer organization, the most violent protest broke out that actually prevented them from speaking. And there's video footage of it online. I mean, it is so angry and so violent that these people didn't actually get to speak. Now, the organization did come out and apologize, but it's like, that's not enough. What are you actually doing about it? 2019, the same thing happened with the same conference. And now that conference is happening again, and the task force actually put out a statement talking about demanding a ceasefire and all of the regular speaking
Let's
points.
talk about that for just a second. Every single anti-Zionist out there since October the 8th, before even the land incursion started, before we even started attacking them via the air and responding to the invasion of October the 7th. We see the most horrific things we've ever seen since 9/11 are really in the 21st century that were live broadcasted and live streamed for the world to see. And all of a sudden, it's freedom fighting. The only people that are saying this are part of the extreme left, part of the progressive community.
There's a part of the extreme right now as well.
Yeah, but I mean, we're called inhuman for not wanting a ceasefire.
We want a ceasefire. I'm sick of hearing this. I just want to say this, and I'm really sick of hearing this. We want a ceasefire. Israel wants a ceasefire. Jewish people want a ceasefire. The global Jewish community and Israel, the Israeli community, everyone here wants a ceasefire. We don't want a ceasefire that's going to render us defenseless, and we don't want a ceasefire where we don't see our hostages coming home, and when we don't see Hamas dismantled, because they're just going to do it again, as they've said they would. So this is a misconception.
Tell me why you think so many people want us to have a ceasefire while neutering ourselves, because that's what it
Because they
seems
want
like.
us to neuter ourselves. That
Plain and
is
simple.
plain and simple.
They
This
do
is
that.
nothing new for us. If we look through our history as Jews, we've gone through, there's been every iteration of every movement. I mean, look at what Hitler did with the Nazis. It was about the Jews run the banks, right? This is an age-old trope. And now it all comes down to the all-powerful Jews, right? And Israel encompasses that because Israel is a power player. It is a country that has power.
You're in LA.
Yeah.
Okay. JVP is huge there, Jewish Voices for Peace.
Yeah.
If not now, very popular over there. What is it like for you dealing with these organizations? Because I assume
I don't deal with those
But I would assume you would be like their poster boy.
They hate me. Are you kidding me?
That's my point. They hate you.
I think anybody that's taking like group trips to the Islamic Republic regime under the eye of the Islamic
that's
Republic
what I'm talking about.
ministry,
If not now in JVP, Jewish Voices for Peace, they've all been in support of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The majority of the Jewish people voted for Obama. Okay, and he gave us a propped up Iran in response to us putting him into office. And I can't figure out how we have such a brainwashed segment of our population who are trying to speak for all of us.
Jewish population, you mean?
Yeah.
You won't find that many people from Mizrahi or Sephardic families such as mine that hold those anti-Zionist beliefs.
Would you say that that is because Ashkenazi people rationalized God away?
I don't know. The way I view it is, I think most Mizrahim are a little bit closer to the oppression that our families, for example, my parents left Iran. It wasn't my grandparents. I think that a lot of the Americans that I've come across who are Ashkenazi, who come from their family's diasporic experience was in Eastern Europe and in Europe, usually are so far removed from the persecution that their families went through. Not everybody, but usually most of them have family that have been in the States since well before the Holocaust. They didn't come as a result of escaping the Holocaust. They're functioning as a white person. They're not dressed in religious garb. They're not Orthodox. So they, for all intents and purposes, get through American society as white people.
Basically, they're a bunch of little privileged white passing Jews.
Essentially,
it's a completely different experience for a Mizrahi.
Absolutely.
What happened with Mizrahim is more fresh and constantly denied. And the reality of that ethnic cleansing is constantly denied.
It's not even talked about.
It's not.
You want to talk about apartheid? Let's talk about Algeria. Let's talk about Libya. You want to talk about apartheid? Let's talk about the Islamic Republic in Iran right now, today, that has different sets of laws for Jewish people and for other religious and ethnic minorities that are not anybody who's essentially not a Shia Muslim.
When you're doing your activism,
yeah,
and when you're involved in the digital activity that you're involved in, what's the type of hate that you get? What is like the realm of the comments that you're constantly getting?
I started utilizing Twitter after October 7th because my account on Instagram kept getting restricted.
Why?
I have no idea. People, I'm guessing mass reporting, and I also know that their algorithm like picks up on certain words, which now I've learned, like you can't write out Hamas or Hezbollah, any terror organization, you have to use characters, whatever, because the algorithm picks these things up. Anyway, it's been sorted out since, thank God, but I started utilizing X, Twitter, and I've gotten probably the most amount of hate that I've ever received in my life on there, and a lot of it is incredibly homophobic. Incredible. Like, I'm taking screen grabs of whatever I can from these homophobic comments because it goes to show the cognitive dissonance within people that are supposedly fighting for a free Palestine in the name of leftism, yet are excusing the most disgusting homophobia that I've ever seen in my adult life.
And probably most of those people were okay with the JCPOA.
Yeah, of course. I mean, these are the same people who are now in the streets chanting Yemen, Yemen, take another ship down, right? I mean, they're
it makes no sense
propping up the Houthis.
How do you feel about what happened between 2008 to 2016? How Iran was near like falling. You know, they almost had a complete revolution, and if Barack Obama would have supported it in the beginning of the Green Revolution, it could have been the end.
Which he's admitted.
He did admit it.
Yeah,
right.
He said that that's actually one of his regrets was that he didn't vocalize and back up the Green movement, and he wished that he did. Now, I want to name that the JCPOA. I think it made more sense when Obama introduced it back when he did. Uranium was only enriched to a minimal level. I didn't like it. I didn't agree with it, but I could intellectualize and understand the fact that he thought, well, okay, maybe if we can sit down and have diplomacy, they won't be so aggressive, whatever. I get it. What doesn't make any sense to me at all now, in 2023, 2024, all these years later, is appeasing the Islamic Republic regime in order to try and get them to continue these talks, which ended with the Trump presidency all those years ago. That doesn't make sense to me.
Are you upset with the Biden administration?
Yes, I listen.
You voted for him.
I did vote for Biden.
Would you vote for him again?
This is such a topic that's like a difficult thing for me to even grasp because people get so upset, but I don't know who I would vote for or if I would vote at all. And let me tell you something, I didn't become a US citizen until 2020. And the number one thing
Wait, explain that to me.
Well, I was born in the UK and I was raised there until I was 14 years old, and then I lived in the US with a green card.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That I didn't know.
Yeah. That was the one thing I was excited about. I get to vote. I'm not a fan of Trump at all. And I get to vote him out. And I liked Biden. I don't dislike Biden. I think that there's misconception that when I criticize Biden on my social media or when I'm speaking, that it's because I'm an anti-Democrat or because I'm a right-winger, which I'm not. The truth of the matter is, I believe that those of us who voted for our elected officials to get them in office are the ones who need to be holding them the most responsible. But we don't, because we're busy playing popularity games. Well, no, that's Biden versus, whatever, Democrat versus Republican, and I'm a Democrat, so you can't always defend, you need to speak up.
But if you look at the trend, the foreign policy...
It's atrocious.
It's atrocious. And not only that, China has risen to power, Russia invaded Ukraine. I mean, this is the second conflict between Israel and Hamas, even though I don't like people calling this the Israel-Hamas war. This is the start of the Israel-Iran war, in my opinion.
This is the start
of
the
Third World War. Every time I say Iran, I feel like an idiot every time I say Iran and not Iran. And I get,
that's okay.
And I get comments all the time because I'm just a schmuck that constantly
That's okay. You're
says
just
the wrong
American.
thing.
That's okay.
I'm just American.
I think what's more
terrible.
important is to refer to it as the Islamic Republic regime,
100%, or Khomeini's Iran.
Or Khomeini's Iran, but it's not Iran, whatever it is.
No, it's not Persia. It's not
and the majority of people within
history.
Iran view it as an occupying foreign force. They don't view them as an Iranian government.
So now we're in this situation where they were handed much more cash. All of their proxies are starting to attack Israel and American ships.
What they retaliated against Pakistan this week, Iraq. We're on the brink of World War III.
Where do we stand today, and where do you think it's going to move forward?
I really don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see what the upcoming election results will be.
Who are you going to vote for?
I don't know. Listen, where the Republican Party has gotten it so wrong, And where they've gotten it so wrong with me as a queer person is a lot of their policies that they're pushing, the anti-LGBTQ plus agenda.
It's very funny. What they're doing with the broader queer community is very similar to how they were with the gay community in the 80s.
It's exactly the
It's
same
exactly the
talking
same.
point.
They're assuming there are no conservative queers, which
Yeah,
I find
I mean-
very interesting because there were plenty of conservative gays.
Yeah, there still are. And I think that the problem is that a lot of politicians are sort of leaning into the polarization that's taken place since Trump became president.
The majority of the extremists out there consider us just vitriolic warmongers.
Yeah, and it's not just extremists, though. I mean, it's everybody on the left, and I get it. Let me tell you something. People want to dislike us, and when they have an excuse to dislike us, they're going to take it. That's how it's always been.
Do you think the Jewish American leadership deserves a little bit of criticism for trying to constantly bring everybody into the fold, to not having a strong stance on Jewish identity, Israel, Zionism?
I mean, it's about assimilation, right? Isn't that what we've always done throughout history in every land and country that we went to? It's about assimilating. It's about becoming part of the culture and society. And
do you think they went too far? Because I feel like for you brought up a really good point about the difference between Mizrahim and Ashkenazim. And like I feel like Mizrahim can assimilate in a way that is completely different from Ashkenazim, because Ashkenazim go full board, if that makes sense. Whereas Mizrahim never truly, fully ever assimilate, if that makes sense. Not to say that that's always the case, but...
I mean, they do eventually, but I think it's just still more fresh for a lot of us. And on that topic, I mean, if you speak to Mizrahi elders, they're not even ones living here, I mean, living in the US anywhere, they're traumatized by what they saw on October 7th because they know that language.
Right.
They know that form of anti-Semitism. They know exactly what it is. It's not new for them.
That's actually really interesting because we have so few Holocaust survivors left, and all of the ethnic cleansing that happened in the Middle East happened about 10 years later, which is a huge difference if you really think about it. And they're still around to tell that story, whereas the majority of the Holocaust survivors have died out.
You're right.
And you know, you mentioned that earlier. I want to thank you for coming on Unfiltered as my very first guest.
Oh, I'm honored. Thank you.
Is there anything unfiltered you'd like to say?
Islamic Republic of Iran, woman, life, freedom, always, and down with Hamas.
I'm Yisrael Chai, mother.
I'm Yisrael Chai.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
you for coming.
Thank you for
It's
having me.
such a pleasure.
Boom.